Grateful that we have brothers and sisters in Christ who mean so much to us, that we can come together with them and enjoy their company and enjoy fellowship around the Word of God. So as we do that again this morning, we would ask your blessing on this day as we gather in this place to fellowship with one another and with your Son, Jesus. We thank you for his promise that he would be present in our midst, even if there's just 2 or 3 of us that gather in his name. And so we're certainly gathering together this morning in his name, and we would ask your blessing on everything that is done in this place, that what is said, what is done, what is sung, everything would be to your honor and your glory, and that you might be pleased with what you see and hear from us. For those of us who have the privilege of teaching the Word of God this morning, we would ask that you would fill us with your Spirit, that we might present your Word well. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we are in the 46th chapter of the book of Isaiah. And I know it doesn't seem like it, but we're actually making really pretty good time in our study of Isaiah. For a book study done by me, we're making really good time, remarkable speed, almost the speed of light. Well, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but this is kind of an interesting chapter. It's not a long chapter, but it's a good one. And what we have in this chapter is, once again, God contrasting himself with other gods. And particularly in this chapter, he's going to contrast himself with the gods of Babylon. Now, there might be a near and a longer-term application of this, and who knows, even an end-times application. Because while prophecy doesn't repeat itself, it's like history, it rhymes. And so you'll see a prophetic theme, and you'll see it repeated again and again. And you'll see God contrasting himself with Babylon, clear into the book of Revelation, Babylon the Great, who has corrupted the nations with her immorality and idolatry. And so, this is an ongoing theme down through the ages until God finally puts an end to it all. So this morning, we're going to see Isaiah mocking the greatest 2 gods of Babylon in contrast to himself. So let's begin with the mocking. Verse 41 of 46, Bel has bowed down, Nebo stoops over. Now Bel is another name, a Hebrew name for the chief god of Babylon, Marduk. And why they sometimes called him Bel, I don't know. But Marduk had a son named Nebo, and these were considered the greatest and most powerful of the gods of Babylon. They were the gods even that directed and assigned human destiny. So these were gods who supposedly were the rivals of the true and living God, who supposedly told people what their destinies would be. And so he talks about them being bowed down and stooped over. Their images are consigned to the beasts and the cattle. The things that you carry are burdensome, a load for the weary beast. They stoop over, they have bowed down together. They could not rescue the burden, but they themselves have gone into captivity. Okay, what's being said here about these 2 gods? Well, first of all, these false gods are helpless in time of crisis. Now, I said there could be a near-term fulfillment of this, because during the lifetime of Isaiah, Sennacherib, who had lost so terribly when he came against the people of God when he invaded Judah, has now returned to his capital of Nineveh, and very soon thereafter, the province of Babylon rebelled against him. And he shocked everyone with the brutality with which he destroyed Babylon, really reducing it to a pile of rubble. Now, the Neo-Babylonian Empire would rise from that rubble and be ruled by the great Nebuchadnezzar. But for a while, Babylon was destroyed. And the great gods of Babylon were loaded onto the back of carts, and they were taken captive to Nineveh. Now, this would happen again later when Cyrus the Great would conquer Babylon. Nineveh would become a memory by that time. Nebuchadnezzar would rise to power. Nebuchadnezzar would load the gods, exalt the gods of Babylon, Marduk and Nebo, and it looked like they were having a big comeback. But then Cyrus the Great would conquer Babylon. Really, the gates of Babylon would be opened before him, just as Isaiah predicted. And guess what he's going to do with Marduk and Nebo again? Load them on carts and take them to his capital, which is Susa. And so twice the gods of Babylon are going to be carried away, carted away, literally, to a foreign capital. And the reason for this is the city of Babylon would be under siege. In Isaiah's day, Sennacherib would do it. And of course, later, as Isaiah predicted, Cyrus the Great would do it. But whether Isaiah is referring to this or it's one of those reoccurring prophetic themes of the gods of Babylon, the gods that were worshipped by the greatest empire in the world, when the time of crisis came, not only could they not deliver Babylon from the invaders, they couldn't even deliver themselves. And you get the picture of the entire process, and maybe as they've loaded the statue of Bel and Nebo onto the carts, it starts to topple. And maybe it falls down and they have to prop it back up again and get it in the cart and tie it down better. You know how it is when you load the back of a pickup. And so get the thing all tied down so we can move it, take it away from Babylon and take it captive to Nineveh or later to Susa. And so the irony here, and God is really just making fun of the whole process. These poor beasts have to haul these great stone idols, and you see them kind of struggling with the burden. They're burdensome. The load is for the weary beasts. So the beasts have hard duty here because they have to move these gods who can't even save themselves from the humiliation of being taken captive to a foreign capital. And so they could not rescue the burden. And again, maybe they're falling along the way, but they're propping them up, retie them, get the load set again, eventually getting them there. And for the proud Babylonians, how humiliating. How humiliating to find that the God that you had trusted in had to be hauled away by oxen, and there is nothing they could do to defend themselves or the people who had put their trust in these false gods. And so God is showing through this how ridiculous it is for anyone to trust in gods like this, who can't do anything when the crisis comes. And also, they can't save those who worship them, and those who worship them have to then save them from toppling over. Very interesting picture. Now, the application of that is timeless. Isaiah is speaking for his day and perhaps speaking prophetically of what would happen to the gods of Babylon after Babylon was restored, after its destruction by Sennacherib. What would be an application for our day and time? What are the gods of our day and time? What do people put their trust in who don't know the true God?
Finances?
Yeah. How quickly that can fall apart, right? I remember hearing stories and reading stories about, Black Monday when the stock market collapsed in 1930, was it?
29.
Yeah, when the Great Depression hit. And people jumping out of skyscrapers because fortunes were lost overnight, and suddenly people who had trusted in their investments and their portfolio found that their portfolios were empty. I was reading an article this morning, someone talking about how they had lost everything. Everything they had been taken away from them by Bernie, what was his name? The Manhoff? Say it louder. Madoff. And they'd lost everything to him. And they had thought that they were secure and that they had everything they need to lay aside for the future. But how quickly wealth can be lost, how quickly health can be lost. Many people, that is what they worship, right? They're at the gym every day, working out like crazy. I remember an incident years ago when I was living in Denver. A friend of mine was really into physical fitness. He belonged to a gym, and I can't remember the name of the company that had these gyms, but they were somewhat popular. They were not at several places in the United States, and he took me as a guest, and so I worked out for a little bit, and then they pulled me aside, and they tried to sell me on a gym membership, and they had been keeping track of the fact that I was woefully out of shape, and I was really struggling and puffing and panting. And the guy trying to hard sell me says, "You know what? You need to work out. You are going to die." And I says, "Well, so are you." And the thought had never hit this young man, how quickly health can be gone. How quickly any other thing that we trust other than the true and living God can be destroyed and taken away. And the timeless application from this passage is you should put your trust in a God who cannot be bowed down and who doesn't need to be carried by you. He can take care of himself. I have to remind myself sometime, because I'm a bit of an apologist and I jump in online. I did it twice this morning, I'm sorry to say. But I don't do it for the person who posts the nonsense. I do it for others who might read the nonsense, because you're not going to persuade that person, but others read it and you might make an impact on them. And so that's why I do it. But, I have to remind myself from time to time that God can take care of himself. He really doesn't need me to defend him. That all of those who mock him today will be gone tomorrow. He'll still be around. He is not impacted by human unbelief or blasphemy. And that's good to know. Well, we move on then, where God then talks about himself in contrast to the gods of Babylon. The next paragraph, beginning with verse, those who've come in a little late, we're in the 46th chapter of Isaiah. It says, "Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, you who have been born by me from birth, and have been carried from the womb. Even in your old age, I will be the same. Even in your graying years, I will bear you. I have done it. I will carry you, and I will bear you, and I will deliver you." That's just a tremendous verse for old men, huh? I have, of course, primarily he's speaking to Israel about Israel, but by way of application, I think it is a wonderful application for those of us who are maybe getting a little old. I'm not there yet, but it could happen. And I'll let you know when I feel that I'm getting old. But Israel says, God says to Israel through Isaiah, "I've carried you from birth." Now, when was Israel? He says Jacob, Israel is Hebrew poetry. The first line is completed by the second line. So Jacob, Israel, the same. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. The Israelites are the descendants of Jacob. When were they born? When was Israel born? When did it start? Did it start with Abraham? It didn't. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. He really did have a lot of sons, you know. There was Ishmael. Okay? And then he got married after the death of Sarai, and his second wife, Keturah, had several sons. And they are part of the Arabs who dominate the Saudi Arabian Peninsula today. And then, his son Isaac had a couple of sons, Jacob and Esau. The descendants of Esau are the Palestinians. Now, I could explain how that happened historically, but that blood feud continues to this day. But Jacob was born, and with him, all of Israel, all of his posterity in the Jewish way of thinking. And so from the very beginning of Jacob and his descendants, Israel, God has carried them. That's what he's saying. Contrast that with Bel and Nebo. He had to be carted away. He couldn't carry his people. He couldn't save his people. There's not a thing he could do for them when the crisis came. But what God is doing is reminding Israel of their past. And he has reminded them that unlike these gods, I carried you. You've been in captivity at various times, but I have continued to carry you through all of that. So Israel's God is the God who carries his people. And also, he will continue to do that in their old age. No matter how old the descendants of Israel are, how long in the future it may be, he will continue to be the covenant-keeping God to his people. He bore them in their infancy. He will carry them through to the end. So it is a promise that whatever happens, the rise and fall of nations, God will carry his people. And he will also save, and I got really small print here, he will carry them and he will save them. So a promise of future deliverance. Now, in the light of what Isaiah has been saying throughout his book, this is a message of comfort. And remember, he changes the tone of his message beginning with chapter 40 of Isaiah, when God says, comfort my people. And so where there were judgment prophecies in the first part of Isaiah, and there are some in the second part as well, interspersed with these prophecies, and you see more of these rather than less of them, are these promises that Israel, in spite of their unbelief, will have a future. And God knows everything that is going to happen. That is really the ongoing theme in the section we're looking at. God knows the future. He can even call Cyrus by name before Cyrus is born. He can predict what Cyrus is going to do. And he is going to work in history so that what he has in mind for Cyrus, the great king of Persia, not yet born, will eventually come to pass. So God makes it very clear that he is fully aware of Israel's present rebellion, and he is fully aware that they are going to continue to be a rebellious people, and that's going to be something that we're going to read in this chapter. But he is not through with them. And we'll see why as we move further into this chapter. He will save them. And the implied question is, why then would you be interested in departing from such a God and worshiping the kind of gods who cannot even carry their people? Why would you be tempted with idol worship? Look and see how foolish it is. And this is one of the reasons I think he was probably referring primarily to the destruction of Babylon that was happening in his time, as Sennacherib destroyed the city in a shocking manner and took the idols of Babylon, their greatest gods, captive to Nineveh. I mean, it was an object lesson he could point to. And we read that Sennacherib himself would be eventually killed in the temple of his own God because his God was not able to protect him from an assassination, even while he was worshiping that God. And his point in all of this is, how foolish is it? How wrong is it? How unfaithful are you, Israel? In light of all that I have done for you, that you would be tempted now to worship a worthless idol. And the ongoing application, sometimes, especially when we're going through difficult times in our life, it's good to remember what God has done for us before we lose faith. I'm thinking of the old hymn. I'm always thinking of old hymns, aren't I? O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. And really, that thought could be inspired by the section we're looking at. As God is saying, I am your help in ages past. I am the one Israel that has done so much for you. And yeah, I have told you that because of your sin, difficult days are going to come. But that it does not mean that my faithfulness to you, my people, whom I've carried from infancy, are going to be abandoned by me, even if you abandon me. And that is an ongoing message we find in this whole section. We'll find it in this chapter. Any thoughts you have on these first two paragraphs? Well, God now calls out on faithful Israel, and he calls them to remember some specific things. And he asks a question. And he's asked it throughout this section, to whom would you liken me and make me equal and compare me that we would be alike? And again, that is a question we've seen before in this entire section of prophecy where he keeps asking that. And now, again, he's got a stark contrast between these gods of Babylon, the greatest gods of Babylon, the top two gods of Babylon being carried into captivity, falling, having to be propped up. You're going to compare me to that? Look what has happened to the people who trusted those gods. Those who lavish gold from their purse and weigh silver on the scale hire a goldsmith, and he makes it into a god. They bow down. Indeed, they worship it. They lift it up to the shoulder and carry it and set it in its place, and there it stands. There it stands. It does not move from its place. Though one may cry to it, it can't answer. It can't deliver him from his distress. You know, I commented on this in India, and I think I've shared this before, but everywhere you drive in India, you see idols. And I'm out in the countryside, and there's a small shrine set up and an idol of some god there, and it's in a cage with a padlock. And I joked with the people in the car with me who were Christians. I says, why do they have to put a padlock on and build a cage around their god? And he says, well, this is so that someone will not get in there and deface their God. And I says, can't he take care of himself? And of course they laughed because they were Christians. But of course they can't. And yet this someone had unlocked it because this god had flower lays around it. They had decorated this god, honored this god with beautiful flower lays like you would see in Hawaii. You know, they're very common in India too. And then they locked it up again. And yet, if that worshiper had a need, could that God help him? He can't even get out of his cage. They have to lock him up for protection. Now, an Indian, Hindu would say, well, we just believe it's kind of like the power station, and he's the place where you plug into the power. Okay, but you still believe, as you bow down before that image and call out for help, the God who is empowered that image through a special ceremony performed by a priest is going to somehow hear you and answer your prayers, which is what the use of image in worship is all about. in whatever setting, including when it's used by Christians and those who use images. The whole idea is somehow through using this image, I'm plugging into whatever spiritual person there is represented by the image, whatever spiritual power there is that is possessed by that spiritual entity, and yet it can't do a thing for you. The God is helpless. His hydrant is worthless. And yet they spend their wealth on things that can't save them in the end. They take their gold, and rather than using it for something useful, they have it shaped into an image, they set it in its place, and there it sits. Until someone steals it for the gold, or some foreign nation captures it and carts it away to their capital headquarters. And God's rhetorical question, you're going to compare me to that? Really? In light of all that I have done for you, Israel, what's wrong with you? I'm the God that saves. I'm the God that carries my people. And I like that application. We don't want to skip over it too quickly. Even in our old age, for individual worshipers of God, the idea of the God is not just faithful to his people in a general sense, but he will be faithful to us in a specific sense because we are in a covenant relationship with God through faith in Jesus Christ. And so God will never leave us or forsake us. He is one in whom it is safe to trust. Everything else will let you down. But he will never let you down, even if at times it seems like he has. And this is what it would seem like to Israel. And it is what it has seemed like to Israel ever since the fall of the temple in 70 A.D. Many Jews lost their faith because of the Holocaust. And I heard one documentary where this Jewish man was saying, where was God at Auschwitz? Where indeed? Has God then forsaken his people whom he foreknew? It's a question Paul will ask in Romans. And his answer will be, may it never be. And Isaiah is going to give the same answer. Because Israel is forsaking their God, because they are drawn away to worthless idols, there is going to be a consequence. And Isaiah has told us of those consequences. And right now in the passage we just read, he has issued a pretty strong rebuke on them. But I want to keep reading. Where did I leave off? There's no one like me.
I think you're verse 8.
Verse 8 is where I need to start reading? Okay. Remember this and be assured. Recall to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things long past. For I am God. Again, there is no other. I am God, and there is no one like me. He asked a rhetorical question. Who's like me? They're standing there. I mean, there is no one like me. How so? I declare the end from the beginning, from ancient times, things which have not been done. Okay. Again, he goes back to this. And remember, he's been saying that as the ultimate proof that he is different. And recall that Nebo and Marduk supposedly are the ones who determine the fate of people in the future. They can't do that. But what he is saying is, think back in the past. Think of all of the prophets I've sent to you. Think how many times I've told you what was going to happen before it happened. I've just done it again. I've told you that long after Isaiah's dead and gone, there's going to be a conqueror named Cyrus, and I'm going to anoint him to accomplish my purposes in days to come. And I'm telling you this in advance because I can do that. And these other gods cannot. I am the God who declares the end from the beginning. From ancient times, things that have not been done. But I tell you before it happens, see. How so? Saying, my purpose will be established, and I will accomplish all my good pleasure. You see, it isn't just clairvoyance. God is not only saying that he knows what will happen in the future. God is saying, I have a plan. I have things that I am doing in time and space. There is a purpose for what I am doing, though you may not understand it. And remember, we have already read where God, through Isaiah, says, my ways are above your ways, my thoughts above your thoughts. For as the heavens are above the earth, so my thoughts are above your thoughts, and my ways above your ways. And so he has already told us that he has something he is doing in time and space that we cannot comprehend. Our minds are too small. Our understanding is too small. And I keep quoting C.S. Lewis that what we will say, first words when entering heaven will be, of course. Because someday it will make sense. Someday we will have the capacity to see what God has done, what he is doing, and what he will do. And at that point in time, that which is we see through a glass darkly will then be clearly seen. But now we get glimpses of it, and we can figure out that something is happening, that there's something going on in history. The German historian von Ranke, the founder of the realistic school of the interpretation of history, at the end of his career says, after I'd studied all of history, after I'd studied it all as well as I could, I became aware of an occult force at work in the affairs of man, something I couldn't put my finger on, and yet that exists in spite of the apparent, can't think of the last word to use there. I memorized well, but I forgot the last word. The confusion that exists. And his point was, I studied history, and I studied it. I was the man who created the objective view, just the facts. He says, yet when I finished, something's going on. Something occult means hidden. Something hidden is going on here. And it looks like the events are just random, but after I'd spent my whole career studying history, I can see something that I can't put my finger on that's going on. And that takes me back to the book of Ecclesiastes, where the author of the book of Ecclesiastes makes the same point. We're smart enough to figure out that there's a purpose, but we're not smart enough to figure out what in the world's going on. And his conclusion is, quit looking at history and your life as a mystery to be solved. It is, but it's beyond you. So instead, look at your life as a gift from God to be enjoyed while you have it. And really, we're seeing kind of the same thing here with Isaiah. He knows what he's doing. We don't. But given the way he has worked in the past, what we have seen him do, we can trust him with the things we cannot see or understand. I compare it to this with my kids. Before Pam and I had kids, you're always so blissful about what parenting is going to be like, right? And then you actually have kids and you discover the truth. And one of the stupid things we said was, when our kids ask us for a question, we're never going to say because we told you so. We're going to give them an answer. Well, what we discovered was that our kids were really smart, and sometimes they asked questions that were above their pay grade. And there were questions that we understood the answer to, but we know they won't. It's not that they're not smart. It's that they just aren't mature enough to understand the answer if we give it to them. But sometimes we tried. And they're sitting there, huh? What? They don't get it. And finally, you sometimes just have to say, well, because I said so. And our whole assumption here is you have every reason to trust me. Sometimes we'll have to say, well, you're too young to understand that. Boy, they don't like that. Especially as they begin to get a little smarter. They're in school now. Test me. Well, you're still not there yet. We just recognize as raising our kids, there's a level of maturity, and you're not there yet. You'll get there, but not yet. See? And I think this is the way it is with God and with His people. He tells us, I know what I'm doing, trust me. And this is what He's saying to Israel. You don't get it. You're going to go into captivity to Babylon. That doesn't mean that the gods of Babylon are greater than me. I will carry you there too, just as I've carried you from birth. And I will continue to carry you because there is this covenant. And Yahweh, the covenant-keeping name of God. When God could swear by no one greater, the book of Hebrews said, He swore by Himself. And the idea is you are not keeping the covenant, but the covenant contains both blessing and curses. And because I'm the covenant-keeping God, I will keep covenant. But the covenant also includes restoration. Now, you don't deserve any of it. You don't deserve to be carried by me. But I'm going to do it anyway. And that is the message He's going to continue to give here as we continue to read this chapter. Okay, He's got a purpose. He's going to accomplish it. He says, what are His purposes? He says, I call the bird of prey from the east, the man of my purpose from a far country. Again, this is Hebrew poetry. You say the bird of prey. It's a man. In Hebrew poetry, the second line, the way this kind of poetry works, in Hebrew poetry, there are rhyming thoughts. And one of their ways of doing this is you have one line, and then you complete it and explain it in the next line. And so he is saying that if a bird of prey, that's scary. Surely that isn't God's plan. He says, yeah, I will call the man of my purpose from a far country. And probably a reference here back to Cyrus, which is kind of the theme in this block of prophecies. He's already predicted that Cyrus is going to come down on the Middle East as an irresistible force. No one is going to be able to stand in his way. And by this time, Israel will be captive in Babylon. Really scary. I mean, you have built homes in Babylon. Jeremiah told you to do that. You're going to be there for a long time. And so get comfortable in Babylon. But how scary would it be to see a new army come into the city? To see the great Babylonian Empire fall overnight? Now, before Cyrus took the city, there were some battles in the open field, and Cyrus just brushed them aside. Here comes Cyrus, the bird of prey, God's appointed instrument to bring His judgment upon sinful Babylon. Don't worry, God has it. Truly I have spoken, I will bring it to pass. I planned it, and surely I will do it. What God has determined to do will be done. Just as simple as that. So, with that, he gives one last message to sinful Israel. Listen to me, you stubborn-minded who are far from righteousness. I will bring near my righteousness. It's not far off, and my salvation will not delay. I will grant salvation to Zion, my glory for Israel. Do you ever fear that when you have sinned and you're feeling really guilty about it, that God's done with you? Israel had every reason to fear that, right? God doesn't sugarcoat it. He says, who are you? Well, You're a stubborn-minded people. I have a term I use in my classroom that I don't really feel comfortable using here, but it has to do with a donkey. That's what he's saying. You're a bunch of donkeys. You're stubborn-minded people. And you're a long way from being a righteous people. We might expect him at this point to say, I'm done with you. Look at what I've done for you. I've carried you from the time you were little children. But look how you have repaid me. You have violated the covenant that I made with you at Mount Sinai again and again and again and again. Well, this is the last straw. He said, nope. What's he going to do? I'm going to save you. Wow. Why? I'm going to grant salvation to Zion, which would be Jerusalem. And my glory, again, the second thought completes the first. It's incomplete. Just Jerusalem? Oh, no. No. Israel. My glory to Israel. We go to the New Testament, Romans chapter 11. Paul, speaking of the Jewish people, says, right now, they're your enemies for the gospel's sake. But they are beloved by the Father for the sake of the prophets. Interesting verse. Right now, what are they? Romans. Right now, they're your enemies. They're opposing the gospel. They hate the gospel. They're leading the persecutions against you. They're your enemies. You'll be tempted to hate them. But remember this, God still loves them. How can he? Because of the fathers. Reminding us that there is still a covenant. Just before this, he says there is coming a day when all Israel will be saved, after the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. So the promise in Isaiah is repeated by Paul that yes, Israel is stiff-necked and far from righteousness. Nevertheless, God, who foresaw it all, is going to glorify himself in the end. And so all Israel will be saved. Do they deserve it? No more than we do. Are we any better than they are? What would I be apart from Christ? You know, none of us have any claim to the grace of God. Receiving grace from God is not a human right. And nevertheless, in his grace, though we are a stubborn-minded people, far from righteous, nevertheless, he saves us and he keeps us, not because we're good, but because he is. Not because we're faithful, but because he's the faithful God. And that is the message, I think, of this chapter, and I think it is one of the great themes of the book of Isaiah. Any questions or thoughts you have on this passage?
Mark.
Yes.
So I have a thought, and that's that this passage is, really call first to trust God and reasons why, and secondly, I think its final verses are a call to come to righteousness through God. I mean, he's saying, my righteousness is near. But when I'm thinking about this in Isaiah's prophecy of that Jerusalem will be reestablished after the exile, but eventually, God incarnate comes to Jerusalem, and his salvation is near there. And again, the same call to a stubborn, stiff-necked, unrighteous people to put faith in God incarnate there in Jerusalem, and
And they will reject it again and again until the end. It goes on to the present hour. But the promise of Romans 11 is there is coming a day when they will believe. You have that also in Zechariah. They will look upon me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as an only son. And so that, God, it isn't because they're faithful, it's because God keeps his word. And, the promises to Israel in the covenant were all temporal. We have a better covenant. But the promise that we enjoy now, because they didn't want it, will someday include them.
Because of their stiff-neckedness.
Because of what?
Because they were so stiff,
Yeah.
the gospel, it became, that God said, and you reject the gospel, and I will then take the Gentiles, cast them in.
And they'll believe. That's what Paul says in the very end of the book of Acts. Since you don't want it, I'm taking it to the Gentiles, they'll believe. But what we see in Isaiah is all that's been predicted. Isaiah talks about this great ingathering of the Gentiles. The thing they didn't understand is how in the world it's going to happen. They didn't understand that it was going to be through their unbelief that God would then open the door for all who believe to come in throughout the nations, people from every tribe, tongue, and nation. But as Paul says in Romans 11, can you imagine what wonderful things are going to happen when they finally do believe? And, if their unbelief resulted in salvation to the world, what is their belief going to be? And so, again, he's the covenant-keeping God. And he's faithful. Other thoughts? God, we thank you this morning that you have made an even greater covenant with us, ratified with greater blood than the blood of bulls and goats. So we are safe in your love, and you have a plan and purpose for us that is glorious beyond our ability to even begin to comprehend. And we have every reason to trust you because you are faithful and you are good. So thank you that in Christ you have made yourself known to us. You have saved us. And you have, in some way that we can not completely understand, given us a role to play in the outworking of your plans and purposes in time, space, history. We're just little things. And yet we have a part to play too. So Father, help us never to look upon that as a bit part. Help us always to give everything we have into doing that which you have called us to do. Grant that we would be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in your work, being fully assured that our work done for you is never in vain. We thank you and we